In the summer of 1920, a man in a straw hat and a sharp suit was making $250,000 a day. Not in a year, not in a month, a day. Thousands of people lined up around the block to hand him their savings. Police officers invested. So did their sergeants. He bought a mansion, a bank, and a fleet of cars, all in a matter of months. There was just one problem. He had no business, no product, no investment at all. The entire fortune was built on a single, simple lie. And every scam you'll ever see on this channel traces back to this one man. The strange part? He didn't even invent the trick that made him famous. Welcome to Trail of Greed, where we follow the money behind history's biggest financial crimes, the frauds, the collapses, the con artists who chased a fortune and left ruin behind. This is episode 1, and there's no better place to start because the word we use for this entire category of crime, Ponzi scheme, comes from the man in that photograph. So who was he? How did a penniless immigrant convince an entire city to throw money at him? And why, more than 100 years later, do people still fall for the exact same trick? Let's follow the trail. His name was Carlo Ponzi. He was born in Italy in 1882, and in 1903, he stepped off a ship in Boston with, by his own telling, about $2.50 in his pocket. He'd gambled the rest away on the voyage over. For years, he was nobody. He washed dishes, he waited tables, and got fired for shortchanging customers. He drifted between cities, always chasing the shortcut, always certain the big score was just around the corner. In Montreal, he found work at a bank that served Italian immigrants. The bank was paying impossibly high interest to depositors, and paying it, it turned out, not from profits, but from the deposits of new customers. Sit with that for a second, because that's the whole con. Pay the old investors with the new investors' money. Ponzi watched it up close, years before he ever ran it himself. The bank collapsed. Its founder fled. And Ponzi, broke again, forged a check. He was caught and spent 3 years in a Canadian prison. When he got out, he got arrested again, this time for smuggling Italian immigrants across the border into the United States. More prison time. By the time he finally settled back in Boston in his 30s, Charles Ponzi had a criminal record on 2 sides of the border and almost nothing to show for his life. What he had instead was a lesson he'd never forgotten, and a hunger that had only grown. Then, in 1919, the idea arrived in the mail. A letter came from overseas, and tucked inside was a small slip of paper called an international reply coupon. Here's what it was. If you wrote to someone in another country, you couldn't include your own stamps for their reply. Their post office wouldn't take them. So the postal union created these coupons. You bought one in your country, mailed it, and the recipient swapped it for stamps in their country. Simple. Boring. Completely legitimate. But Ponzi noticed something. After the First World War, European currencies had collapsed. So a coupon bought cheaply in Italy or Spain, in a weak currency, could be redeemed in the United States for far more in postage. In some cases, you could buy a coupon for the equivalent of 1 cent abroad and turn it into 6 cents of American stamps. Buy low in one country, redeem high in another. That's called arbitrage, and it's perfectly legal. It's still legal today. And here's the thing you have to understand about why this worked. The idea wasn't insane. On paper, the math held up. as long as you didn't dig too deep. That's what made it the perfect bait. It wasn't an obvious lie. It was a real loophole, just barely plausible enough that a smart person could talk themselves into believing it. In December 1919, Ponzi opened a company in Boston. He gave it an official, important-sounding name, the Securities Exchange Company, and he started telling people he'd found a way to make them rich. The pitch was irresistible. "Give me your money," Ponzi said, "and I'll pay you 50% interest in 45 days. Wait 90 days, and I'll double it." Think about what that means. A bank might pay you 4 or 5% in a year. Ponzi was promising to double your money in 3 months. It should have been unbelievable. But the first investors handed over their cash, and 45 days later, Ponzi paid them exactly what he promised. That's all it took. Those investors told their families told their neighbors. The ones who doubted watched their friends get rich and came running. In January 1920, 18 people invested about $1,800. By that summer, Ponzi was taking in around $250,000 a day. Some accounts put it close to $1 million on the biggest days. People mortgaged their homes. They emptied their life savings. By some accounts, 2/3 of the Boston police force had money with him. The line outside his office stretched down the block, people clutching cash, terrified they'd miss out. And Ponzi lived the part. He bought a 12-room mansion in the suburbs. He bought luxury cars. He bought a controlling stake in a Boston bank, the Hanover Trust. Partly, it seems, so he'd have a place to park the flood of cash and a lever to pull if things ever went wrong. But behind the marble and the headlines, there was nothing. Because here's the secret at the center of the Securities Exchange Company. Ponzi never actually ran the coupon trade, not in any real way. To back the millions he'd taken in, there would have needed to be hundreds of millions of these coupons moving through the system. The reality? There were only a few tens of thousands in existence worldwide. He wasn't investing the money. He was simply paying the early investors with the later investors' cash. Exactly like that bank in Montreal years before. The same trick, just bigger. Much, much bigger. And a machine like that has one fatal flaw. It can never stop. The moment more people want their money out than are putting money in, the whole thing dies. Ponzi was running on a treadmill that had to spin faster and faster and faster forever. It couldn't last the summer. The first crack came from a financial journalist named Clarence Barron, the same name behind the financial papers still published today. Barron did something almost no one else had bothered to do. He did the math. And he pointed out the impossible part. If Ponzi were really buying and selling these coupons, the sheer number of coupons required simply did not exist on planet Earth. There weren't enough of them. There never could be. The story ran in the Boston Post, and it spooked people. Investors started showing up not to deposit, but to withdraw. Ponzi did something audacious. He stayed calm. He paid out everyone who asked, peeling bills off the very pile of new deposits that was keeping him afloat. The panic eased. To the public, he looked vindicated, like a wronged genius. The line to invest formed all over again. But the fatal blow didn't come from a journalist or a regulator. It came from inside his own operation. Ponzi had hired a publicist, a man named William McMasters, to manage his image. And McMasters, working closely with him, came to a chilling conclusion about his own client. He decided the man was either a fraud or didn't even understand his own business. He found documents, and he took them to the Boston Post. On August 2, 1920, McMasters' exposé ran on the front page. His verdict was brutal. Ponzi wasn't a genius. He was hopelessly insolvent, drowning in millions of dollars of debt he could never repay. Cornered, Ponzi made a fatal gamble. To prove he had nothing to hide, he invited the authorities to audit his books and agreed to stop taking in new money while they did it. But remember the machine. The machine only works if new money keeps flowing in. The instant he turned off the tap, he sealed his own fate. The run came hard. Thousands of people who'd seen him as a savior a week earlier now stormed his office, demanding everything back. And the audit confirmed the nightmare. Investigators found that, against the millions he'd collected, Charles Ponzi was holding essentially nothing in coupons. By official accounts, a trivial amount. He had never been investing the money at all. On August 12, 1920, Ponzi was arrested and charged. In the end, he faced dozens of counts of mail fraud for using the postal service to lure people into the scheme. The damage was staggering. Over roughly 8 months, he had taken in around $15 million, a colossal fortune for 1920, from an estimated 40,000 people. Ordinary people. Families who'd handed over everything. Several banks tied to him collapsed. By most accounts, investors eventually recovered only around 30 cents on every dollar, and only after years of legal fighting. Most never recovered at all. The one bright note? The Boston Post won journalism's highest honor, the Pulitzer Prize, for the reporting that brought him down. You'd think that would be the end of him. It wasn't. Ponzi served his federal time, but the moment he was out, while facing more charges, he popped up in Florida, selling worthless swampland to investors and promising them 200% returns. The same man, the same con. He got caught again. He tried to flee the country disguised as a ship's crewman. Caught again. Finally, in 1934, having never become an American citizen, Charles Ponzi was deported back to Italy for good. His wife stayed behind. She divorced him a few years later. He drifted, schemed, and failed his way across the world, ending up in Brazil. A stroke left him partially paralyzed. And in January 1949, the man who had once made $250,000 a day died in the charity ward of a hospital in Rio de Janeiro, a pauper. He left behind just enough money to cover his own burial. Near the end, he was asked if he had any regrets. He didn't really offer one. Instead, he called it the best show ever staged in Boston since the landing of the Pilgrims, and said it was worth $15 million just to watch people fall for it. He died broke and forgotten, but his name didn't. Because every time someone pays old investors with new investors' money and dresses it up as genius, we reach for the only word that fits. We call it a Ponzi scheme. Here's what gets me about this story. Ponzi didn't succeed because he was a criminal mastermind. He succeeded because the lie felt believable. And because once a few people got rich, everyone else stopped asking questions. That same pattern is about to repeat over and over through every story on this channel, just with bigger numbers and better suits. So I want to hear from you. Drop a comment. Would you have invested with Ponzi in the summer of 1920, before the crash? Be honest. I read and reply to everyone in the first hour. And if you want to know how this exact trick grew into a $65 billion version of itself, that's the story of Bernie Madoff, and it's coming next. Subscribe so you don't miss it. Follow the money. Follow the trail.